Hello, my name is Sass. Today we are going to talk about why IRV is worse than FPTP for US government elections right now. That context is important that I did not include in the title right here, um, but I just wanted you to click on it. However, the thing is, this is actually meant for a very specific audience. This video is meant for voting enthusiasts who have really spent a lot of time studying voting science, who are really pretty advanced. I don't really intend to show really any information that is new. This is more about putting the puzzle pieces together that you already have. If you are a beginner in voting science, do not watch this. It's all going to, a lot of it's going to go over your head, and you're not going to believe half the things I say. As you shouldn't. You should do the research on your own and find your own truths, and then come back to this after you've done, I don't know, another 100 hours of study or whatever. If you're more immediate level, or sorry, intermediate level, I still wouldn't necessarily recommend watching this. I'll put a couple links in the description as to like some stuff you can look into, and this is really targeted toward the people at the head of voting science who continue to say over and over again that they don't like RCV, but at least it's better than first past the post. That's just not true. Let's get started. Let me show you why. One other thing. This video is going to be pretty negative. So if you were trying to have a good day, come back on a different time. Definitely come back, but I'm not here trying to promote anything. I really am just trying to be mostly academic. There'll be a little bit of opinion toward the end, but a lot of this is just going to be academic, just putting things together. Okay, so what you maybe haven't considered. I'm going to do each of these different bullet points today. This is what we're going to go over. So election codes, implementation costs, and failure rate, which we're going to go over the dichotomy of voter satisfaction, efficiency, and voter behavior trends. We'll go over complexity, ballot exhaustion, expression, and lying to voters. We'll briefly touch on near-tie nightmares. We'll go over non-additivity. We'll briefly touch on the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. We'll talk about the real reason that we fight for voting reform in the U.S., which is the duopoly. And then I'm going to end on the constitutionality of IRV and potential implications on public morale for voting reform, which I think is just kind of the most extreme thing. So let's get into it. Election codes, implementation, costs, and failure rate. So IRV does not have momentum. Many jurisdictions in the U.S. have failed to adopt or implement IRV because state election code doesn't allow it. So for example, here in Texas, here in Austin, IRV has been shot down in court, or has been shot down before because of the state election code. And of course, it just has been adopted again a couple months ago. That's right, it is June 2021 when I'm recording this. And it's going to get shot down again. That's really unfortunate. And again, this is not news to you. You know this already. Methods like STAR and approval don't run into this problem nearly as much. Implementing IRV is expensive, particularly in small jurisdictions that don't have a lot of money to upend their voting infrastructure, which is kind of the whole appeal of approval voting. And again, this is not news. You know this. IRV is particularly expensive to implement, and the non-additivity plays a role in that as well. But I think really the most important thing here is single winner IRV's success rate for U.S. general elections is only about 42%. This is updated. I'm actually kind of wondering if FairVote, I keep and I'll have the link in the description, I keep a spreadsheet of the success. This is based off of FairVote's RCV, quote unquote, definition. It's a whole thing that you can look through. So this is just a screenshot of part of it, of the latest numbers. But I actually kind of think that FairVote updated their list based on my collection because their numbers line up perfectly, which is kind of funny. So it's this bottom number that I think is really like the one to highlight. So I'm going to push forward because I don't want this video to take forever. So voter satisfaction efficiency, the dichotomy of that and voter behavior trends. This is based off of Jameson Quinn's voter satisfaction efficiency models. I know that there are criticisms about it, but oftentimes when I run into those, usually my response is, okay, so then run your own. And then those people never run their own. I trust Jameson Quinn. Of course, there have other people like John Huang have run their own models. I'm not saying that they're not out there. I'm actually going to link to a link tree that B. Ternary Tao has put together with like every single simulation out there, set of simulations out there. So you can dig through that. But the graph that JQ put together of strategy backfire, I think is really important here in showing the ranges and how some methods perform better for the whole when voters are honest, and some methods perform better for the whole when voters are strategic. And then taking a page out of Sarah Wolt's book of creating these ratios about strategy incentives based on how likely they are to work as they are, or sorry, how likely they are to strategy is to work as it is to backfire. And that using that as a way to show incentive to vote strategically or honestly. So obviously FPTP has a major 17.8 to 1 major incentive to vote strategically, and it performs the best when when voters vote strategically for the whole. But IRV has this backwards trend, so it performs best for the whole when voters are honest, but it does trend toward individual voters voting strategically. Which makes it worse. And as you can see, it extends past this. So the question is, like, how strong is this incentive? Well, this is more about trends, right? So this isn't about, the first election, as we saw, the first, election or two, as we saw in Burlington, Vermont, voters tend to be more honest. But as they discover the system, they get more strategic. They get, they run into they start to understand, and I think a prime example of this is the 2007 San Francisco mayoral race. At the time, likely the largest IRV race in American history up to that point. There were, I think, like 6 candidates on the ballot. There were plenty of candidates on the ballot, and 53% of ballots were bullet votes. That is way too high of a number to write off to low information voters. That shows at least some decent level of strategic voting, at least as good as we're ever going to get. And of course, bullet voting is not the only way to strategically vote in IRV, as you know. It's kind of the simple, dumb way. There are more complex ways to strategically vote, and we have no idea we have no way to tell how many people that were. But let's just call it, even if we were to say 50% strategic in that race, we're still about the same as what FPTP is performing right now. So you're still not really seeing any gain in voter satisfaction efficiency when you're actually looking at trend lines over time. Again, this is why we also see so many repeals of IRV. So let's keep moving on here. Complexity, ballot exhaustion, expression, and lying to voters. If you ask regular voters or even politicians in IRV races to explain IRV to you, they get it wrong a lot, in part because IRV is often poorly explained, right? FairVote puts out just says things that are lies, right? Their whole explanation is based on first choices when really they should be using the language top choice, because your first choice never changes. Your first choice is just the first candidate that you rank on your ballot, and then it goes to your second choice or third choice or fourth choice, if any of them even exist. So it's just the top choice of remaining candidates is what is really happening. And so you run into this problem. I mean, there's a politician, I can't remember who it was, who said that it was whoever got the most second choice votes wins, or something ridiculous. I mean, it's insane. So like that's a problem, right? It is too complex. It is a complex and error-prone tabulation, to quote Mark Fraunmeyer. And this issue of ballot exhaustion, when you talk about ballot exhaustion with IRV, sometimes the response is FPTP also has ballot exhaustion, and they never bring that up. Actually, no, ballot exhaustion and FPTP is different. It's not the same. Under FPTP, your vote does not get literally thrown away. Right? Like IRV literally doesn't count rankings, right? IRV doesn't count certain ballots in the final round when the winner determination is actually figured out, right? FPTP doesn't go through rounds of voting where you eliminate ballots. Everybody's vote is counted. And I get like spoiler effect and all of that, or vote splitting, or it's only the front runners who have a chance. I understand that. This is not a defense of FPTP. It's just saying that like ballot exhaustion in IRV is not the same as FPTP. It's worse. It is worse. It's different. It's fundamentally different, and it's worse. And that ties in with lying to voters, right? And of course part of that comes from the rhetoric of FairVote, where they say your second vote gets counted every time, which we know is not true. But so let's get into. I'll come back around to lying to voters, but this thing of like, okay, why is my ballot spoiled, right? Or it's it's like people don't understand it because it's complex and they don't understand. Or sorry, why is my ballot spoiled? Right, expression. That is expression. My bad. I was like trying to remember it. Rack my brain here for a sec. Yeah, because it's IRV does not have expressive voting. It's this weird. It's like this weird medium restrictive. It's like this weird restrictive medium level of expression of expressiveness. It's not highly expressive ballot. Not only can you not rank candidates equally or skip rankings, which is absurd. Well, in some jurisdictions you can skip rankings, but you can't rank candidates equally, which doesn't make any sense because you can absolutely run IRV with equal rankings, and it would be less terrible. But when you have these complicated ballots, you also have this issue of like you can only rank 3 candidates in a lot of races. It's insane. The NYC mayoral race early voting has just started. You can rank up to 5 candidates. Cool, but there are like 20 candidates in the race. It's insane. And I understand cognitive load, right? Nobody's going to go all the way down the list, and I understand that, and like ballot design and all these things, but like. It's not expressive. An expressive ballot would allow equal rankings or would be a score ballot. And so what this leads to is voters becoming disenfranchised. One of the reasons that a lot of people don't vote is because they feel as though they can't express their vote on their ballot, or they feel that their vote doesn't count. Well, in IRV, some of your votes literally don't count, right? In FPTP, they just kind of they don't count in a metaphorical sense, whereas in IRV they literally don't count. So yes, we do see increases in voter turnout. How sustainable they are, I think is questionable. I don't think that those turnouts are have shown sustainability, but I think that's debatable. But it doesn't. I mean. Like again, you're running into the issues of like, why are people not voting in the first place? And so this comes around to like, when you hand the ballot, an IRV ballot, to a voter, you are lying to them the moment you hand them the ballot, because when you show them the spots for the rankings, you like, doesn't matter what the instructions say. You are implying that those rankings matter, and sometimes they literally don't. And I can't stand lying to voters. And this runs into problems because then voters don't know how to vote. With FPTP, which again is a terrible, terrible method, and I want to get off of it. At least it's the devil that you know. At least people know what it is, they're familiar with it, they know how to deal with it, and they understand it, and it's simple enough to get. I've spent enough time on this slide, I'm going to move on. Near-time nightmares are, quite common in IRV. This is the higher resolution one from Warren Smith's Yi diagram page. He has, of course, a lower resolution one, and and this is only 4 candidates. You start getting, like the 13 candidate situations, it effectively becomes pseudo-random. which is what this mayoral race is about to be. It's just going to basically pick a random winner. It's practically stochastic, and it's just no centrist can win or something. I don't know. It depends on what the spread is. But IRV is literally a series of first past the post elections. You're just running choose one voting, right? Vote for one method. You're just doing that over and over and over again. And so it's like, okay, so you're compounding all of the negative effects of first past the post over and over and over again. And one of those is like this kind of medium level of like, because it's it's not an expressive ballot. FPTP does have a higher level of tie probability than some other methods. But then when you keep stacking on top of each other, you just get a lot of ties. So near tie nightmares, of course, not good for democracy. It's just not good. Non-additivity. This is a deal breaker for me for any method in the U.S. right now, and we're gonna get to that. So if you're non-additivity, it's not precinct summable. Obviously, instant runoff is a bit of a misnomer because results for instant runoff are anything but instant. There was a 2018 San Francisco mayoral race where they were in the final round a week after after the polls had closed. They had 8,000 ballots left to count, and the difference between the top two candidates was like 1,700 votes, and one of them forfeited. Now, I don't know why. I didn't find it in the articles or whatever, but it's a thing that happened. Maybe it was related to it, maybe it wasn't. Now, to be clear, I actually do not think that this is a good argument. A lot of people make this argument about precinct summability. I actually think that it's a pretty weak argument. Tabulation time, in my opinion, is something that Americans will fuss about when it happens, but then forget about it afterwards and move on because they've got bigger fish to fry. There are other problems going on, and it's not something people are going to really care about, and I think they get used to it after a couple of elections. The real argument that I make around precinct summability, around the non-additivity nature of IRV and many proportional methods, is decentralization is key to election security. This is a big deal. U.S. elections, U.S. general elections, let me be very clear in my words, U.S. general elections are some of the most secure elections in the world. And decentralization is the biggest factor in that. There are a lot of other things, right, like how long we've been a democracy and like the simplicity of our method and all of this, and just the hard work and some of the freedoms and rights that we have and stuff. But decentralization is an incredibly important factor here. But when you centralize tabulation to a single point of failure in a long-standing military and economic superpower, all of a sudden many foreign interests who have a lot on the line, a lot of interest in U.S. elections, see an opening for a scaled attack on our elections. It's difficult to scale any kind of attack on our elections right now because it's decentralized, but you lose that robustness with centralized tabulation, especially when you're doing like what Maine does, where you just throw the ballots on a truck and drive them across the state. And it's ridiculous. And let's be clear here, you don't even need to switch out ballots or do anything that complicated. I mean, just knocking out a power line while the computer is tabulating the results. We already have enough distrust in our elections. It's just that, fortunately, the people who do the boots on the ground work of actually securing our elections know that our elections are secure, and it's mostly just a lot of people screaming on social media. So we're kind of doing okay right now with that. But like, we don't need that extra fear. My goodness, how destabilizing would that be? That's just not, to me, for the United States. Non-additivity is a deal breaker for me. National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, obviously IRV is not compatible with it. And the NPVIC also doesn't address the chunking issue, it addresses the chunking issue of the electoral college, which wouldn't affect the state level stuff, but IRV is not compatible. I've very recently, just in the last few months, talked to representatives from both FairVote and from NPV, and asked them very directly, and gotten into a little bit into the weeds about this issue, and both of them have told me and Sarah Wolk when we were talking FPV, that they have a plan. And then we ask them what their plan is, and then they don't have a plan. They don't have a plan. That's really what the lesson was. They don't have a plan. I spent a lot of time working on a plan. It's I think actually really cool. It's pretty aggressive. I'll post a link to it in the description, and then so you can read over 5,000 words. Really, there's a lot. There's a lot there. And then Sarah Wolk and I worked on a more toned down version of it. We have completed pretty much, but she's asked me not to go public with it yet. So I won't have that linked right now. When we do go public, I'll add it to the description. But just keep an eye out on the Equal Vote website for how to, it'll probably be another thing like how to use star voting with presidential elections or whatever. But it's really much more comprehensive than that. Now, again, I don't think this is a very strong argument. Again, much like the tabulation time, I don't think this is a strong argument. Warren Smith's Bayesian regret models about different types of voting reform in the U.S. from 2000 to 2040 shows that the Electoral College is the least important thing. So this is not a strong argument, but it is one I wanted to bring up. So approval voting would be really easy. Would be basically trivial, would be very trivial, and then really any cardinal method, and then Sarah and I figured out how to make even any method that has ballots that allow equal rankings, really make it really easy. But again, you can look into that later. Okay, the duopoly. So this is a little bit more opinion-based, but y'all can pretend like it's only about giving voice to voters, but come on now, like you're passionate about voting reform because you know that the system isn't working. You know that the two-party system is incredibly corrupt, that there's a lot of friendliness behind the scenes with vitriol in front, and that we need more parties, and this is really what it's about. We gotta break the duopoly, and also this is what energizes voters. This is what the whole break the duopoly organization that Clay Shentrup is starting is about. It's about like focusing on this break the duopoly messaging, because a majority of Americans think we need to have a viable third party. And of course we want more than 3. We want 4 or 5 or 6. But it's like you can try to be as nonpartisan as you want, but like that this is the issue, and here's the thing: IRV does not get us out of the duopoly. No, we're not there yet. IRV still has a spoiler effect in vote splitting and center squeeze, and it still produces polarized candidates. It's technically not as bad as FPTP is. It's not quite as extreme, but you have all these other problems that I've been showing along the way. And it is clear that if we're already entrenched in a duopoly, IRV is not going to get us out of it, right? Like that's the important thing. Like what's going to get us out of this? And IRV is not. So, but to address something else that's incredibly relevant right now, just to kind of demonstrate this duopoly rule and corruption. The For the People Act right now. Voting rights are irrelevant when everyone hates the choices. That's a bit extreme. That's a bit provocative. But voting rights, like anything that goes against voting rights is abhorrent, right? Any kind of voter suppression is abhorrent, of course. And there are a lot of provisions in the For the People Act that do help to fight voter suppression, and I am for those provisions. But the For the People Act is not for the people, it's for the duopoly. So these first 3 points are pretty focused on the presidential race. I'm not going to read them out to you. You can pause the screen and read them yourself if you'd like, but I'm going to focus on these last ones that really demonstrate it. So the For the People Act eliminates the limits on donations and expenditures candidates can receive and make. The For the People Act inflates the amount of money national party committees can give to candidates from $5,000 to $100 million, which gives party bosses basically unlimited power to flood elections with big money, right? So this is the thing that Catherine Gell talks about. I know she's an RCV fan, and I'm not, so I certainly don't see eye to eye on her with her on all of that kind of stuff, and this whole idea of like open primaries and then final five, like it's nonsense. Um, it's like, man, just get whatever. I'm not going to get into that right now. But the thing that she does have right, the thing that I really like about her rhetoric is the power of the dollar is stronger than the power of the vote, and directly trying to decrease the power of the dollar is effectively insurmountable at this point. And so we need to increase the power of the vote. That is a thing that we can do. Fortunately, in the United States, it can't be done everywhere in the world, but here, much like marijuana legalization or our marriage equality, we can do the ground up change. We can do it the hard way. Um, and really get the voting reform going to get better representation in office, to hopefully start to get hopefully start to reduce the power of money in our politics. But I think that this is, no, I've not heard any duopoly politician talk about these 2 points right here, um, which are incredibly important and a really big deal. And again, why do people not vote? Because they don't like the choices, right? Turnout is low because people think people can't express themselves on the ballot. People think the choices are terrible. And people think their vote doesn't count. And so like this is the stuff that matters. And then the final point, is that it promotes IRV, and it has money for it and all these other provisions for it. And of course, as you already know, I believe IRV is a deceptive, expensive, unsecure voting method that will further entrench duopoly rule. And when I say further entrench, I mean further entrench for this last point. Constitutionality and public morale. IRV is a death sentence for the United States. First past the post, the Electoral College and IRV are all unconstitutional, all in their own ways and for different reasons. Of course, they all have vote splitting. But IRV also throws away votes. It allows some voters to vote more times than others. IRV runs into a variety of problems with constitutionality. The original plan of Equal Vote Coalition was to spread approval voting and range voting and like Condorcet methods to the point where once there was enough public conscience and momentum around it, they could go to the U.S. Supreme Court and have FPTP declared unconstitutional, hopefully as well as gerrymandering in a much stronger sense than what it currently is, based on existing U.S. Supreme Court interpretations of the phrase "one person, one vote," which actually isn't in the Constitution, but they pull it from the 14th Amendment, which is actually what makes the Electoral College unconstitutional, which is kind of ironic and hilarious. That hasn't disappeared. That is still kind of like a long-term plan underneath. But the fear is, here's my fear, is that let's say you have 12 states with IRV. If some smart lawyer, maybe paid by the duopoly, successfully appeals IRV all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, which has not happened yet, and successfully argues that it is unconstitutional, not only could that damage our chances at getting FPTP declared unconstitutional or help out, I don't really know what would happen, but all of a sudden you'd have 12 states that go from IRV back to FPTP, and that would be devastating. Not just that'd be devastating for public morale. Public morale for voting reform could be ruined for at least a generation, potentially. I'm not guaranteeing that this will or even could happen necessarily. Like, it's very, the language is very dubious. Like, the timing is really important. The arguments matter, and what the Supreme Court looks like also makes a difference. So that would be the worst case scenario, but the worst case scenario is a quite extreme problem. It's a big risk, and it's not a risk that I think is worth taking. And we need to literally prevent IRV from penetrating through. And I have found that people listen, man. if you, I mean, name drop, do some word dropping, right? Like you know terms in voting science that IRV enthusiasts don't know, right? Things like voter satisfaction efficiency, right? Or just, and when I say IRV enthusiasts, I shouldn't say enthusiasts, just regular people who know about IRV, call it RCV. Right. So when you say, well, actually, there's a lot of misinformation out there about IRV. It's incredibly problematic, and it doesn't eliminate the spoiler effect, and it still trends toward duopoly, toward a two-party system. Um, Fortunately, there are dozens of voting methods out there, and one of the blessings of modern voting science is really whittled it down to two main options: approval voting and star voting. Or now, that's my line that I say. I'm partial to star and approval, but if you're a range advocate, if you're a 3-2-1 advocate, if you're like a Smith Minimax or like other quality control say methods, fine, great, cool. If you can get it done in your jurisdiction, go for it. I support all of those. Like, I'm totally down. But like if you approach it that way, I find that people listen, and that people are willing to hear you out. It doesn't work so well on Twitter. Well, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But in person or like over the phone, I find that it works. If you just start with, I mean, the word misinformation alone is something that kind of triggers people to shut up a little bit, especially supporters of RCV, who tend to think that they know like this golden solution. And when you say misinformation, it's like, wait a second, because they know that there's a lot of misinformation about a lot of the things that they know, that they believe, and you can usually get them to listen to you, and as you talk much more comprehensively about voting methods and voting science than anybody they've ever heard before, they're inclined to at least consider looking into other options. And that's the other thing too, is like when I present people with two alternatives that they haven't heard of, uh, and I say like, do you want me to explain them to you or whatever? I think that also allows us to make that argument in good faith. Um, that's another piece of it too. It's like like this video is particularly negative, but that's because the audience uh, is voting enthusiasts who really know their stuff. This is not geared toward lay people. I would never talk like this to a lay person about IRV. I mean, it would never work. Um, but 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 people will pick up that you know what you're talking about if you argue in good faith, and give multiple options, give multiple alternatives, right? Show a problem, provide a solution, provide multiple solutions. So this has been going on long enough, so I'm going to stop. Thank you so much. Like I said, I'll have a couple links in the description if you want to check some things out. But really, we got to stop saying RCV is at least better than FPTP. It's not. It's just not. And every time you come across it, you need to like use it as an opportunity to promote an actually quality voting method that will get us out of this duopoly. Okay, thank you.